One of the first port of call to development is in any society or nation is education, and with literacy, wealth creation, and national stability being the outcomes. In Nigeria, about 10.5 million children aged between 5 to 11 years are not in school, and this is according to the UNICEF, a huge challenge for the country. Education is not limited to school, but also critical thinking, problem-solving skills, creativity, digital literacy are some of the tools that aid development in today's world. But how many people have the opportunity to learn some of these everyday skills? I've got joining me via Zoom and is the National Director, Center for Real Impact International and lecturer, Veritas University, Dr. Tosin Olushola. Thank you so much for joining us on TBC Breakfast. Education is something that we really love to talk about, but some of us do not even want to get into it. But tell us about the correlation between education and national development, especially in these our own reality.
Thank you very much for having me. Certainly, I'm very much appreciative of your opening remark, linking, education, to the development challenges that nations face. I think it is quite obvious and clear that there is, a direct, correlation between education and the level of development in a country. As a matter of fact, it is, worthy of note that the level of development in any country is directly proportional to the system. So countries as developed as our educational system. Talking about education here, I think it is very much important that we make a clear distinction between schooling and education. Education basically is any avenue that provides you with, the requisite, capacity to create value and matches that with corresponding character sets, that makes you, a productive citizen in a particular country. So the level of technology, the level of productivity in the country, the level of national cohesion, the level of security, the level of law and order in the country are all, traceable, to the capacity of the institutions within any country, to ensure that that is taking place and is at optimal level. So education is directly linked, to development aspiration of any country. So it is true that no country can be talking about development and be paying lip service to education. Mm. And when I mean education, I mean both formal and informal education. So if we pay lip service to education and we keep talking about our development aspiration, lately, the media has been awash about security challenges in Nigeria. Not only is Nigeria hosting, the largest number of out-of-school children, in the world, we also have some of the largest number of poverty rates in the world. As a matter of fact, the last Human Development Index, released in 2019 by United Nations Development Agency, UNDP, ranked Nigeria as 161 out of 189 countries, and one of the major indicators that goes into the computing that index is education. It's just a composite index comprising education, health, and per capita income. So to answer your question directly, of course, there's a direct link, between the level of education in any country and the development of that country.
All right. Today, we've got different challenges of, talking about various issues, including terrorism, discrimination. We've got global warming. We've got poverty and gender inequality. We've got child molestations, immoralities, and so on and so forth. And what have you? So it then begs the question as to whether education or these are an offshoot of inadequate education in this part of the world. Because look at Nigeria compared to developed countries, you tend to imagine how rapidly they are developing. And then you now come back to Nigeria, you say, or in Nigeria and some other parts of the country, are all of these problems an offshoot of inadequate education, so to speak?
Yeah, thank you very much. Absolutely. The problems we face, big challenges in security, if you call it, the degrading value system, call it weakening institutions, all the development challenges we face, talking about infrastructure, our inability to add value to our own, primary products, all of these challenges, are symptoms, essentially. They are symptoms of the deficit, of the debt, of the inadequacies, of the, lapses associated with the structure of our education. Now, talking about education for us and linking it to development, I think it is very important that it is one thing to access education. It is another thing, to determine the quality of education being accessed. If we talk about out of school children, that's, a large population of young people, the future of Nigeria, that is not even given the privilege to even access education. And then the second wrong here is the ones who have access education, what is the quality of education they are accessing? I think the conversation around the quality of education, has not been made prominent enough because, of course, we have issues relating to funding, education, and a whole lot of, other challenges, ASU strike, primary school teachers, not having the requisite skills, secondary education, not meeting up to standard. So trust me, the idea of developing a country, in terms of industrialization, you need the right set of education to even evolve the technology in the first place. One of the major challenges we are facing here is that most of the technology that is even needed to begin to jumpstart our own economy development is not domesticated here. Our, industrialization is import dependent. It means that the technology is not homegrown. Most of the auto companies in Nigeria rely on engines and parts, from other parts of the world. Our industrial process depends on machinery and inputs from abroad. Most of the institutions that seem to have some semblance of functionality also depend on manpower and input, from abroad. So how are we linking our educational system to our development process? I think there's a complete disconnect, between the need of our country, and the educational system that we are evolving. And I'm saying this because how do you explain, the fact that in terms of demand, we have huge demand, as a country for food, for clothing, for healthcare, for quality education. And in the same vein, we have a lot of graduate unemployment. So it's one thing to talk about out of school children. So how do we explain graduate unemployment or what, industry of our
right?
Then means that the skill set we are even learning in our schools, is not even meeting the needs and aspirations.
Dr. Tosin Olushola, looks like we've lost you momentarily, but I'm not sure if you can hear me at the moment. Can you? Trying to reestablish connection with you. Dr. Olushola, we've been having a conversation with Dr. Olushola, the National Director, excuse me, Center for Real Impact International, and also lecturer Veritas University. He's been talking about the issue of, the education inadequacies in the country, where a lot of looking at the bridging the gap between the education in the country and development, because it's also believed by so many experts that when we have adequate education, we've got up-to-date curricula, it's all of these things all together are really going to help people, the students, the up-and-coming adults that we're having, ensuring that the country develops to an enviable pedestal. So looking at how all of this come to play, and the ASU, and the ASU problem that we also have, being on strike, going on strike due to disagreements between them and the government. All of these things to come together in having issues with development in the country. So, Dr. Olushola, we lost you momentarily. I want to be sure whether you can hear me now.
I can hear you now. Apologies, my network fluctuated.
Yeah, I can understand. It's part of education, would you say? It's just the network.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. That's just by the way. Experts say, I was trying to say something according to what experts say, that if a country has a higher literacy rate, it will lead to a lower unemployment rate and greater GDP growth. But you made an allusion to the strike by the ASU, the union, and similar unions always embarking on strike due to lack of disagreement or lack of agreement between them and their employers. So if this continues to truncate the process, the progress of our students, is that to say that Nigeria will find it very difficult to develop, or at least develop at a very slow pace, if at all?
All right. Let me just say this, and I think it is important in any conversation that links education to development for us to emphasize, the peculiar challenges associated with Nigeria's environment. There is the deliberate and privatization of educational institutions in Nigeria, and the moment we make education a private good such that only those who have money can afford it, we have not just witnessed challenges. In fact, we are sitting on a time bomb, that just takes time, to explode. What we are having in our hands is a situation where we are leaving the funding of education or access to education. We are beginning gradually to convert education into a private good rather than a social good that has to be provided for all, irrespective of social structure, social strata, or their position in society. If you don't give access to quality education for all, it then means that not only will you have worsening poverty, you would also worsening inequality. It will increase crime rates. So the issue of unions is just basically, I say again, is another symptom that we are dealing with. There's a gradual, if not complete, collapse of the public educational system at the primary and secondary level. So check who is going to those schools now. It's the children or those who cannot afford quality private education at primary and secondary level now that, resort, to public, institutions at that level. So it's for them, quality education that don't have education at all. What we are doing is that we are disenfranchising a whole chunk of our population when it comes to access to quality education. And there's a gradual trajectory, to move into that same policy system at the tertiary level. So ASU perhaps is just trying to fight, at that level that we don't degenerate beyond the level we already are. At this level, we're already at the lowest ebb when it comes to the quality of education in Nigeria. We cannot afford to go in the same direction. Trust me, it is better you educate a people, provide them with the requisite skill that make them productive citizens in society. If you don't do so, guess what? You have more criminals. You will not be able to sleep and not be able to travel in your road. We'll continue to,
Right.
Have you ever asked why even the public officials in Nigeria don't trust our educational system, our health system? That is because the recruitment process, even for our teacher, is very faulty. The funding mechanism educational system is very faulty. We cannot afford to ensure that our education system degenerates to the extent that only those who can afford it, only the rich will be able to access quality education, and the rest of society will wallow with whatever it is that is left as remnant
Dr. Olushola, what would you then
level,
say? What would you then say about, in this day and age, we have students of secondary school and tertiary level who are going into, internet scams, they're involved in internet scams, advanced fee fraud and all that because of their access to the internet and things that they do on their phone, on their laptop. Some don't even sleep. They will say they are browsing overnight, but then what they're doing mostly is, involving themselves in, criminal acts. So what would you call all of this? And then we've also got those who call themselves Yahoo Plus or something, getting into ritual, in all of those things. So what would you say is responsible for this? Lack of education, would you say?
Well, I think this is a conversation we need to have at a holistic, level. Now, addressing the issue of criminality generally, whether it's kidnapping or Yahoo or internet fraud or scam, right? It just points you to the direction of the fact that first, people will seek survival. That's the lowest level everybody wants to be. People will go to any length, to survive. And I'm not in any way, justifying criminality or all of that. But the question where you ask yourself, when you have people who graduate from university 4 years down the line, they are unable to find job. When you have active young people, who could have been productively engaged, whether as, interns in a particular industry, or people learning skills or trade, or people, directly acquiring education in a formal educational setting, find themselves idle, without any form of supervision. They are faced with, a lot of, engagement with the rest of the world, owing to, no thanks to social media, to promote this, lifestyle of, just living luxurious lifestyle, irrespective of how, you earn, the resources to live those kind of lifestyle. So when you juxtapose all of this issue together, it points you in the direction is that there's a de-link. Now, an educational system is not linked directly to productivity. So we are talking about access for those who don't have access to education. How then do we, position those who already have acquired the so in quotes education, but are not productively engaged? Now, if you don't engage people productively, of course, they will find another alternative. They will engage themselves in criminality. They will engage themselves in crime, whether it's cybercrime, whether it's kidnapping.
Okay. So really, that being said,
yes.
Dr. Tosin, let me quickly, because of our limited time now, let me quickly cram this question into this in a short time. It's quite paradoxical that we have schools producing engineers, scientists, medical doctors, teachers, and other professionals, but we often fail to use them. What I'm saying is, rather, if the government wants to build key infrastructures, they prefer to outsource. They outsource this contract, this project, to expatriates and some, universities too that teach building technology to build common classrooms. They also prefer to outsource it, taking somebody from abroad. So is that to say that we don't have confidence in our own products?
Well, I think you have just said it rightly. For me, the challenges associated with the educational system it certainly has to be an ongoing conversation. Of course, like you rightly mentioned, we're talking about quality of education being at its lowest ebb. We have educational institutions now, to be fair, we have educational institutions now that are focused on certification. Our value are so degenerated to the extent that people just want to acquire a degree, at all costs. They just want, BSc, B.Ed, B.Engine. Have you ever asked yourself the direct link between our University of Agriculture and agricultural output in Nigeria? That's supposed to be a direct link. What's the nexus between level of, works or engineering program that is being done at public sector level and our universities of technology? There's a complete disconnect. So it's like the universities of technology, they are just on their own. So when you talk about if there's a direct nexus, there's a direct collaboration, there's a direct policy environment that utilizes our own manpower, and we have a lot of them. Utilizes our own manpower to solve our own domestic problem. Then if they don't have the right environment, whether for teaching or for research, then government prioritizes funding them, prioritizing creating the enabling environment for them. But as it's well now, there's a complete disconnect. The universities of technology, universities of agriculture, they are on their own, and then government in terms of our budgeting framework, procurement process is also a complete, different ball game. So at the end of the day, you don't have this link. So first, of course, and it tells you obviously that government themselves know that, the quality of education that they have evolved over time is not good enough. Sometimes, they have to outsource some of these services because really, nobody should doubt the fact that the level of capacity, in our system is dwindling. And that's not because we do not have potential, but because we have potentials that we have, failed to create enabling environment, to optimize and enable them thrive.
Well, we sincerely hope that all of these things will be really looked into, because a very, very important thing that you can't be producing people, churning out graduates and not being, confident enough to use them. Well, National Director, Center for Real Impact International and lecturer, Veritas University, Dr. Tosin Olushola, thank you so much for our insights this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.